Howdy, everybody. Windy City Thetan Watch. Tonight we're in the studio and we've got a special guest. And I keep on saying special guest. They all are special guests. So I'm going to say that from now on, we just have a guest in with us this evening. Our guest is one of the protesters who's in Chicago. I first met him in Chicago, and he would protest, but he wasn't really streaming yet. And then slowly we encouraged him, and he was more willing to do that. So now you'll see that he's streaming as well. And we're going to talk a little bit about Scientology, but shortly after that, we're going to talk. He was also involved in an incredibly impactful incident in American aviation history. He survived a plane crash, and we just recently went past the anniversary of that, and we'll go through there as well. I'll let you know when we're going to transition into that space, just in case anybody is triggered by that, or if you came here just to see Scientology. Conversation. But without further ado, I'm going to bring to the stage Yisroel Brownstein. How are you doing, Yisroel?
What's up? What's up?
All right. So for those of you that don't know, Yisroel Brownstein, he has about 1,000 credentials. He's very well degreed. He's is it jiu-jitsu? I think it's jiu-jitsu as a fighter.
That's right. MMA, but Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu is my favorite.
Nice.
Pastime, anything.
Yeah, he falls into most interesting man in the world type space. I'm also going to tell you that he's incredibly socially connected, and he's got these incredibly unthought of connections to people that we know in our community in that space. He's very well respected in his own community. He's of the Jewish faith. You're not Jewish national though, are you? Or no, you're Jewish national and Jewish faith, right?
The best way I like to describe it is that like Judaism itself is not just it's people consider it a religion, but it's more like a racial thing. Like you can get your blood tested and see if you're Jewish. The best way to explain it is like you pretty much can't be an atheist and a devout Christian at the same time. You can't really be Islamic, like my friend Muhammad always says. You can't be a devout, part of Islam and an atheist at the same time. But in Judaism, whatever your beliefs are, it doesn't. If your mom's Jewish, that's according to the Jewish faith. Your mom's Jewish, you're Jewish. About 10% of Jews in the world identify as religious. I am a religious Jew. I wear my yarmulke, as Wendy can tell you, everywhere I go. And I grew up ultra Orthodox. I grew up very religious.
Excellent. So there's actually another awesome thing that's going to happen tomorrow. I'm very excited. Yisroel knows somebody in this community, and I'll let you guys try and figure this out. Somebody in the community from that's based in LA is going to be in Chicago soon, and as I told you before, Israel's very well socially connected. He happens to know this person's family. And we're going to have an opportunity to both be at the org tomorrow, and we might also do some vlogging around the city. So I'll give you a second. There's about Yisroel. There's about a 10-second lag, so we'll have to wait just a moment to see if anybody's going to come up with a name on this.
I was going to ask you also really quick, Wendy. So on the right, I don't mind that it's there, but on the right side of the screen, that panel's still there. That doesn't matter, right?
Correct. Yep. That should be there. So you can see that's hopefully there to help you show the comments. If you want.
So do I have to hit?
No.
The chat, because I don't see a chat.
Okay. Cool. That's it's just on my side. On the phone, I don't usually do it on the phone, so it's going to be a little more challenging. So
no.
I just want to let everybody know that Amy. Amy is one of Yisroel's mods, and since we're going live on my channel, and I'm very appreciative of the fact that we're live here. I've invited Amy over, so we're gonna have a guest mod tonight as well. Fuzzy and Amy are working through that right now, so that we can get that coming through.
How do I bring up the chat so I could see it? Do I hit that chat button?
I think so.
Let me just try.
Hopefully nothing exposed. I've never done this from the phone. I'm always impressed by people that have tiny fingers and can do this from the phone.
So I can only be in the chat or with you. So I could see the chat. Uh-oh. Can
All
you
right.
see me?
Yep, you're back now. You're back now.
Okay, 1 second. Let me just, for some reason, I can't see myself. Sorry, guys. Hold on. So I guess X out of that. There we go.
Nice. All right.
I
I'm
think,
not.
guys, just so everybody knows, anybody I can't see the chat right now, but Amy's gonna check out, and I'll just say the one quick thing. Um, Anybody that's a classmate of mine or someone that's like from my community that doesn't usually watch, if you just put the number high and then your comment, Amy will know to look for your comments. So just put that number high and then the comments. And also, Amy's going to be dropping a a uh, uh, a link for a charity organization. It's like a very prestigious charity organization. I am not connected. I don't work for them or anything like that. I'm not connected. But the any money raised is going towards towards yes, victims of trauma, but specifically one of my close dear friends from university in Israel. He lives on the other side of the pond. He was in a really terrible accident recently, so any of those donations are being given in his name, and he should have a full recovery. Daniel Yisroel Ben Yocheved, that's his name, is Daniel. So I just wanted to, if anybody sees that in the chat, that's what. Hopefully he's even watching.
Well, I'm hoping all the best for Daniel, and I am never going to try. Is it a Yiddish name or a Hebrew name? Like what?
Daniel's a Hebrew name.
Okay,
Daniel, yeah.
gotcha. Yeah, I don't want to try the other. The other name is
Well, the
very.
other name is my name.
Yes.
His second name is the same name as my name.
Ah,
We have this.
interesting.
Yeah,
Interesting.
yeah.
All right. So Amy, and by the way, Amy is a mod. We've got it all worked out. So Amy's modding right now. So I'm gonna. Well, Israel, how did we meet? Do you remember how we met?
I do. Um, since about 2008, I might have been aware of what Scientology was before this, but in about 2008, something they hurt some people that I love very much. Let's just leave it at that. Without, I don't want to. I've been a little bit more private about that. But if you guys ever go, you could see on my channel, I talk about it, and I go to. There's a headstone that I go to, whatever. But they hurt some people, and ever since then, I've been very passionate about very passionate about like the activism within the context of recognizing the difference between a religion and a cult. And so Scientology was like always kind of, let's call it, on my radar. And then all of a sudden I followed William Googe, Streets LA. I had been following him prior to Scientology. And then all of a sudden he got this whole thing started with Scientology, and I was just like, oh my, this is amazing. And then all of a sudden I hear that they're opening up a big org. I had not seen any of that prior to that. I knew their old location, and I had gone by to, say some words on numerous occasions, but I didn't know. And then the second I heard there was, so they always like try to get people from different religions there. So they tried really hard to get people from my community, and my community probably does not even realize this, but I got my hands on a ticket to go to the actual opening. Like they should have I got like this close to actually getting through. And then they quickly realized that I wasn't a fan. And then I went to the police station closer to my neighborhood, where I was just arguing with the cops about whether or not I could legally get in there. And I just started watching Shannon, who was live at that time. And I kind of watched her that day do the live. And then very shortly after I came out, I didn't start streaming yet, but I literally met Shannon, who, showed me how to do a lot of the stuff. And I owe her a lot of credit. But I basically met Shannon and you at the same time one day when I finally just went down there and said, all right, I'll talk to them and try to become a part of this. And it was awesome. From that day forward, we've at least the two, all the Chicago protesters. I love you all. It just happens to be that Shannon and Wendy were the two that I see it like on a regular basis. And we with the three, I was also in touch with them. So like Wendy would let me know when he's going to be down there, and I would do the same, and we would try to coordinate the best we can. I'll say this about the other Chicago protesters who I love just as much. A lot of them don't have the ability to come out during the week, and Saturday's the only day. Saturday's the only day that they can come, and Saturday for me is Shabbat. It's like the Jewish Sabbath, and so we don't do work and stuff like that. And I unless it's like an emergency or whatever, I don't use electronics or stuff like that. And so I don't get to spend as much time with them because that's the day they're usually able to come out.
Yeah, and that's a very true statement, right? So a lot of the people that are Chicago, they're not city center. They're coming. Some of them are coming from other states, right? And they've professed what those places are. I just don't want to disclose that right now. But yeah, I remember that. Yeah, it was Shannon was there, and you were having a conversation, and we were all talking, and I'd come up later, and we introduced ourselves. And what I always found amazing about you is that you just showed up and protested. You weren't streaming. There was no, that you just were against Scientology, and you wanted to say, "I'm here. I'm showing up. I'm doing my work." Right. And I really appreciated that. There's been several people in the Chicago community that actually have done that, where we've seen these protesters that they're not streaming. They're just here all the time. So I just want to hit on something real quick. Dorothy Walters, you may or may not have inadvertently won our little contest. So you can see when I bring these up on screen, right?
I actually can. I was happy about that. Yes.
Nice. Okay.
I saw something Amy mentioned also, that Amy was actually watching when I met Shannon.
Yep.
And you. She actually watched us, the three of us, meet.
Yeah. Oh, sorry. Let me read. So yes, Mindy Willens will be here on Friday. I will tell you that I believe that you'll see the three of us again, both at the org, and we'll see, just what the day holds after that in that space. So I'm very excited about that.
I am too. Mindy mentioned that the goal is that we're going to try our best to be at the org by noon. That's the goal. We might get there a little bit later than that, but our goal is to get there at noon.
Yep. And I might come as early as noon. Now I'll say that noon is an interesting time because most of the staff members are then at lunch. So that's usually why I try to start at 12:40. But again, even at noon, maybe we do a little bit of let's survey the area, show everybody around what's there before we really have to worry about the staff and the activities that are going on there.
I actually thought about that later. It's going to be perfect for Mindy, because in case we're just running it's going to depend on the trains. We're going to take the Red Line, which her followers are excited to see public transportation in Chicago. So This is not doxing anybody, but her family lives 4 blocks away from my family. So it's easy for me to meet up with her and go take her on public transportation, which her followers really want to see too.
Yep, that's excellent. I will say that Mindy did great. Yeah, Mindy did great in Portland. And one thing that we're not going to know is just before we went live, she was at the pharmacy getting hair color. So we don't know who's going to show. We don't know. We won't be able to recognize her when she shows up. We'll just know the bright shining smile.
Mm-hmm. So. That is 100% correct. She literally said to me, "I'm getting off the phone. I'm about to go live because my chat's going to convince me what hair color I should get."
Nice.
I thought it was hilarious. Yeah, she's awesome. Mindy's amazing.
I agree with that 100%. Just a little bit more on. So now we've gotten to the point where you have a history because of close connections, friends, family have been harmed by the church. You and sorry, I'm saying church, but whenever I say church, I really mean cult. And in our group, I hope you understand that I don't believe that they're a church. I tend to be somewhat respectful and try to pretend that, yeah, right, whatever. But then you finally, the courage is the wrong term. We finally got you technically savvy enough that we were able to have you start streaming.
I think courage is appropriate. I think that was a part of it. It was you and Shannon spent like a day just showing me exactly how to do it. But it was you and Shannon that really got me to I had met Trashy, who's awesome, also, and I had been there multiple times with him. But I would say that it was you and Shannon that really were convinced me to finally start streaming.
Excellent. I really appreciate that. That's and again, that it you there in the Chicago community, there are some people that have incredible scholastic backgrounds, right? That we have people who are, in the master and PhD level of sociology, psychiatry, psychology, law. So we've got some powerful, knowledgeable people in this group. I'm the dumbest one in the Chicagoland area if we measured paper. But tell us a little bit about your background in regards to that, if you feel like sharing.
My bachelor's degree, ironically, is in religion. It's in Talmudic studies, and you guys can watch. I dedicated a stream at one point to explaining the tremendous difference between a religion and a cult. And you can watch it there, and you'll understand. But anytime you have people convincing you to disconnect from your family and stuff like that, that's like the number one sign that you're not in a religion. You know what I mean? No matter how ultra orthodox. Yeah, there might be a fringe community, very like 0.00%, 1% of even the religious Jews. There is, people have brought up that they've heard of this community. There's like one or two communities, very small. That, but in general, I grew up like extremely right wing, and I have siblings that don't believe in like religion at all and stuff like that. And the rabbis or the people in the community love them just as much. There's no disconnection. So my my high school was probably one of the most prestigious schools I've ever gone to. If I were to really put it up to prestige, my high school was the most difficult, which led me to have the ability to go through undergrad within 2.5 years in Israel. And I was just studying Talmudic studies. That's what it's called. So my bachelor's is in Talmudic studies from a very prestigious yeshiva / university in Israel. And then when I came back, it had always been my passion to get into psychology. And once I got back, because I was living overseas for a while, and when I got back, I got myself into the doctoral program, and I completed my doctorate in clinical psychology.
Nice. You still practice, correct?
So I specialized in trauma and substance abuse, and I opened up my own 501c3, which kind of serviced the community that I come from. That was essentially the idea. It was like the first of its kind, really, around the world, and it was really good. Without getting into too much detail about this right now, there's a point in my life where I really fell apart, like. Which was later on. Ironically, I did not have the trauma in my life did not affect me tremendously till a little bit later on in my life. And at that point, I stopped doing what I refer to as couch work, and I started to just focus on a mentoring program that I run. So that's full time. What I do now is the mentoring program, and each and every one of the individuals in my program might have a therapist, but their therapist is separate from what I do. It gives me the ability to, there would be way too many like ethical and legal boundaries that I would have to respect, and so my position lends to the ability to work well with the families, and a lot of times it's with troubled teens, young adults, but even there are people. I have a 85-year-old man that's in my program. So,
gotcha. All right. Again, folks, told you, just a very bright man. A lot of educational background. I'm always impressed when I'm talking to him. All right. I think that.
Thank you.
No. So for the most part, I think that we've kind of talked about where we're at in Scientology. Now, the other thing that I think is amazing about you, and by the way, you should stay away from transportation, because while this is an incredible story, it's not the only story of a transportation mishap that you've been involved in. But
this one rabbi in my community used to tell the congregation, if you're traveling with Israel, make sure you sit on his lap.
Yeah, no doubt. So what this past Friday was the anniversary, right? This past Friday was the anniversary of United Airlines Flight 232. And this was the flight that it had multiple stops. We'll talk about those multiple stops. But one of the stops that it was going to take, it's a DC 10. It was going to go from Denver to Chicago on its way to Philadelphia. And it had a critical failure during that flight. And there was the pilots lost all control of the airplane. And again, the pilots did awesome in regards to what's going on. We're going to talk about survivors in this show. We're sitting with somebody who was on a plane that did not contact the ground the proper way. So there was a terrible crash that happened in Sioux City. It was all over the news. I remember seeing it when I was of that age, and it was just traumatic to see what had happened. I think it's still the highest. It's the deadliest accident for United Airlines, to the best of my knowledge. I'm not sure what the highest American accident. Probably.
The best way to think about that is that at the time, this is before the internet, the two most watched news flashes or whatever, like news pieces ever was the shuttle crashing and then my plane crashed. And then obviously once the internet came, different things popped up, but it was the largest of crashes that had survivors. So, eventually one of the flights on 9/11 was United. So that was obviously a very deadly crash. But it is true that up until that point, for sure, and it's still considered the largest disaster, aviation disaster with survivors.
Gotcha. So kind of, I want to set the table a little bit here, and I'm going to ask you to correct me where I'm wrong, because I probably will be wrong. I've been using the interwebs, and the interwebs lie to us all the time. So this plane, this route would have been from Hawaii to San Francisco. It's a DC-10. DC-10 doesn't have as large a range. It's not a 737 where it's going across country, and not a 777 where it's going across oceans. So the flight plan was basically Hawaii to San Francisco to Denver, Denver to Chicago, and then finally heading over to Philadelphia.
Correct.
Yep.
That was exactly correct.
Right. And on its way to Chicago, there was an incredibly loud noise, and there are plenty of news stories on this. If you go to the interwebs, you'll be able to see this. There's a couple of links in the chat. There's somebody I follow, Mentor Pilot, and he kind of debriefs crashes throughout aviation history. But it's a DC-10. There was an incredibly loud noise. It jarred everybody. Everybody knew something had happened, to the best of my knowledge, and we'll get into more personally what that meant. And what had happened is that there was an engine failure, and this engine failure threw a fin, and this fin cut through the hydraulic systems. Now, in all airplanes, there are multiple redundancies. They call it the Swiss cheese model. A lot of things have to go wrong for a plane to have a big problem. And it just so happens that this particular catastrophe, the engine blows up, it pushes a piece of metal through the hydraulic lines. Once it goes through the hydraulic lines, the pilots have zero control over the things that make the plane go left and right, up and down, side to side in that space. So there's a calamity in that scenario, right? I kind of want to just stop there. Do you remember the sound? Do you remember
Absolutely
that something bad happened?
Absolutely. I remember it was about an hour into the flight, and it's like clear as day in my memory. I remember thinking that's the first time I've ever heard something explode. It was truly like an explosion.
Gotcha.
And it's very clear in my memory. It's something that I see very often when I go to sleep in bed. But yeah, it was clear. I mean, you kind of felt like the whole plane kind of felt like we were just dropping right at that moment. That the pilots eventually gained some control, but when that initially happened, that explosion, prior to losing all hydraulics, there must have been enough where the pilot initially was able to regain control after that explosion, but it absolutely was an explosion.
Yeah. I'll talk about a little bit. I'll talk it in a more general element, but you'll have more personal contact with what's about to occur here. So the there's a fortunate element. The way that the DC-10 was built is there's an under wing engine on both sides, and the one thing that the pilots still have is throttle control, so they can still make the plane go left and right slightly, and with a big lag, like it'll be a 10 to 30 second lag, and they found that they could kind of get the plane to go where it wanted, and they found that it made right turns better than left turns. So they slowly started making these larger right turns to practice trying to figure out how to make this plane obey the pilots. I mean, they knew that they were in a great deal of trouble. My understanding is there was an awful lot of communication between the cockpit and the crew cabin, and they're differing stories of how many times people were back and forth between the cockpit and the main cabin. But you could tell there was. I think that it was obvious there was crisis going on, and the plane's not doing what planes normally do in that situation. And I will say that I want to call out that the pilots did an incredibly great job. This was Sully before Sully, in my opinion, in regards to they got this plane to the ground and people survived this particular crash.
It's referred to as the impossible landing.
Yeah.
In aviation. Like all pilots that that go to school or whatever they're doing to become a pilot, they actually have to go through a simulation of what my cap did on that day. So yeah, it's beyond heroic. We were very lucky to have him sitting in the cockpit. He had flown for, like, I believe it was like six. I believe it literally was six divisions of the military. He flew for the Air Force, for the Marine Corps, for like the Navy, the Army. He flew for multiple. His ultimately his funeral was like one of the most, like, from like a military perspective, it was like majestic, literally majestic. I mean, it was really crazy.
All right. I'm going to play a short video really quick, and it's about 40 seconds. Now I will tell you, you're going to see a plane crash into the ground. It's 40 seconds. If this is something you might not be comfortable with, please avert your eyes. But I just want to let everybody have some scale or understanding of what occurred in this space. So I am going to bring this on screen, and again, I'll let you know that in about 40 seconds, if you're not happy or if you're not comfortable with what might happen here, you can please come back. But here we're going to see the plane, and this is just a civilian had footage of the plane.
Roger, sir. Yeah, that's a closed runway. That'll work, sir. We're getting the equipment off the runway, and they'll line up for that one. How long is it? 6,600 feet, 6,600, and the equipment's coming off. Isolate this.
Yeah, that's really just traumatic. That I remember, the way I would have explained it is, it looked like the plane was doing a cartwheel, and I think those were some of the terms they used on the news stories that were there. And I just want to say, you watch that, and sitting in front of us is somebody who was sitting on that aircraft. It's just amazing, the resiliency of human life, right? Whether you believe in gods or greater beings of whatever nature, it's so many humans, so much effort, so much will, so much positive element. There were survivors on such a traumatic event of this nature. So,
yeah, they had over the radio. They had pronounced everyone dead. Like, my mom was driving back from the airport, and they announced no survivors.
That's, yeah. I'm going to say I'm grateful there were survivors. So
Thank you.
now I kind of want to let's So we've seen in general that we've had this very traumatic experience, but I want to ask Israel, what put you on that plane that day? Why were you on that plane?
That's a good question. It's a good question. So, by the way, guys, in a little bit, especially the sun is setting now in the city, it's not as bad, but these are prescription glasses. Like, not only are they prescription, it's like the bottom half of lenses do one thing, the top half do the other, but they're not like just sunglasses. They're actually these are my glasses. So I apologize. I will probably be able to take them off for a little bit. But I'm not trying to hide any tears or anything like that. If the tears come, they come. If it is what it is, I'm comfortable with that. So what had happened was this: my father is a rabbi, and at the time he was working for a school in Denver, and his job was he's a master, like absolute master at raising funds for charity. And so he traveled a lot for a living, especially at that time. As a little kid, I remember he was traveling like 2 weeks out of the month, probably. It was a huge part of his job. So he was somebody that, through the organization he was working for, they, call it mileage or whatever it was back then that they referred to. He had a lot of that. Now, officially on that day, it was kids fly for $1 a day. So if the parents bought a seat, or just one person bought a seat, the children could fly for $1 that day. We were not. I don't remember feeling poor. You know what I'm saying? I don't remember ever not having food or anything like that. But we definitely were not. At that time in my parents' life, they weren't making a lot of money, and my dad could not afford to get, my mom or dad could not afford to get on the plane with me. As it was, my sister had to fly not too long before the crash to go to a camp in Michigan, a Jewish camp, like summer camp. So my dad was able to convince the airline to allow me because growing up as a religious Jew, there were not that many Orthodox Jews in Denver. There was a community, but it wasn't huge. I had probably about 5 friends that were part of my community in Denver that were like my age. And that was it. Like, it's not like I had a school filled with hundreds of kids my age that I was always playing with. It was really just those kids that I hung out with. And one of my best friends, it's possible, it's hard kind of looking back which one was I closer to, but he probably was my closest friend probably at that time, if not one of my closest friends. One of my neighbors across the street was also one of my closest friends, and there was another rabbi in that school that my dad worked for who was another one of my closest friends. I guess we were kind of equal, that group of friends, but one of them moved from Denver to Philadelphia. And we didn't know till later on in my life that I had struggled with, like, basically being on the spectrum, and it looked at the time like dyslexia, and it was very difficult for me in school early on. Once they understood what was going on, I obviously thrived, but initially I wasn't doing very well. So my parents had made a deal with me. My friend had left the summer before, so in the summer of 1988, my friend, Zviki Medetsky, he moved from Denver to Philadelphia. His dad's also a rabbi, and he was moving to that city where his dad ran a school that was in Philadelphia. I was devastated by by the fact that he moved. He wasn't in the, he was gone. There was all of us, all of me and my close friends, we all felt a tremendous loss when he moved. He also lived right down the block from me. I had one neighbor that was right across from my friend Sammy, lived directly across the street from me. So me, Sammy, and this specific friend, there was another friend, Shmuel Malamed, but this specific friend, like, it would be like on a daily basis, I'd walk across the street, grab Sammy, and we'd walk less than half of a city block to my friend Zviki Medetsky's house. And he moved. and it was really rough on me. And so my parents, they they made a deal with me that if I succeeded in school to a certain extent, and if I, did this thing and that, then they would get me the ticket. And ironically, one of the deals that my dad had made with me was that that I would have to learn this prayer by heart. It's a very spiritual prayer. It's, I really like to say a lot of the things in Judaism, it's not even like you have to sit there, and it's really just like, it teaches you, I'm not referring to all the laws, but like a lot of the most practical daily things that you do, they just make a lot of sense within the context of like being good to your fellow man and just appreciating the world you live in. So there's a prayer, it's called the Traveler's Prayer. In Hebrew, it's called Tfilas Haderech or Tfilat Haderech. It's called the Traveler's Prayer. It's not a very long prayer. It's a prayer that you say when you're going on a trip that's longer than just like your daily commute. So if you're taking a flight, even if you're going on vacation and you're driving a few hours, so like if I drive from Chicago to New York or something like that, or even if I drive from Chicago to Detroit or Cleveland, I'll say this prayer. And my dad had wanted me, he's like, well, if you're going to take the flight, you need to learn the prayer, and you need to basically know it as definitely well enough where if the prayer book's open, you could just read from it. That was ironically one of the deals I made with my parents. And they had agreed that they would let me go. My dad convinced the airline to let me be an unaccompanied minor at 9 years old, even though I was only 9. So the airline allowed me on the plane. And I could start off with this. So I was supposed to sit in the first row right behind first class. And their reasoning was I'd be the closest to the stewardesses by being right by. What they realized was the best place for me to sit if I wanted to be closest to the stewardesses to sit in the very, very last seat of the plane, because then right behind me are the jump seats for the stewardesses in the back lane. And since I was an unaccompanied minor, they figured that would be the best space. And ironically, my parents, when they dropped me off at the airport, I'm sure, Wendy, you remember what it was like back then, but you didn't need to go through like all these security checks. You could walk right up to the gate. So my parents walked me right up to the gate. And when they switched the seats, my father, rightfully so, was frustrated with the airline that they were switching my seat. My mother eventually had told my father, well, he's excited to see his friend, but he's also anxious to it was the first time that I had flown when I was 2 years old, but I never had a memory of being on a flight, So my mom said, let them do it. Don't make him more anxious. Just let them switch the seat. He'll just feel more like, okay, that's his seat and that's it. Don't get into it with them. And that was the choice they ultimately made, which, I feel a little bit of guilt with regards to, the person that ended up in that seat. But had I ended up in that seat, I wouldn't be sitting in the seat I'm sitting in right now.
Yeah, that is amazing. And just anecdotal, and to lighten the mood a little bit, you mentioned the idea that before TSA, right? You used to be able to walk to the gate. That if I was just at the airport, I could go to the gate and I could wave at people getting off a plane and talk to people getting off a plane. When I was younger, I used to go to O'Hare and I would be the official ambassador welcoming people to Chicago when they get off the plane. And I would just tell them any kind of strange fact that I knew about the city. And it was normally I would find the international flights in that time. So yeah, it was definitely just a different time in that.
Remember when we used to be able to we would know if like sports teams were landing. You know what I'm saying? And like you could try to get autographs at the air. That was like a thing back then, if stuff like that. Yeah, you're absolutely correct.
No. So the change of the seat turns out to be, I mean, again, beneficial and solemn at the same time. That right, because of that change, again, here before us sits Yisroel Brownstein, in that process. What did the big explosion occurs? What's happening inside the airplane at that point in time?
So
one thing I want to, sorry, just before you start. So Yisroel was not the youngest person on the plane, but he's kind of considered the youngest person that would have a memory of what happened. There were younger people on the plane, but they would have been at an age where it wouldn't have been something that's stored in their memory banks at this point in time.
Yeah, myself and one other individual from from the East Coast, and I always wish him well, and I hope he's doing well. He also struggles tremendously with he struggles a lot, like many of the survivors do. And unfortunately, he had to see some of the most horrific things happen to his family. He was just a drop younger than me, but it was he and I. His name was Jonathan. Is Jonathan? He's still with us today, Jonathan, and his sister is a little bit older than me, Abigail. We were the two that were kind of like the ones that were, we remembered everything. There was the famous statue that if anybody Googles anything about the flight, you'll see this very famous statue. There was a famous quote that was given. It was like someone won an award for this picture, but Spencer Bailey was another child, and the paramedic was carrying him, and the picture was like, it became like one of the. It ended up being a thing on like National Geographic. It won awards, that picture.
Right.
And they asked that man, they said to that man, "Wow, it's amazing you saved that boy." And I'll just point out that what his response is, and this quote is written in a rock, which I yeah. So, and in that quote, so in that picture where Wendy's showing right now, I'm pointing to a specific person who literally, we'll get into it with regards to my life and his life, and it was the man sitting directly next to me. But the quote he said was, they said to him, "Wow, it's amazing. What does it feel like you saved that boy's life?" And his response was very simple. His response was, "I didn't save the boy. God did. I just carried him," which was very powerful. It was a very powerful statement to be made, because, it's one of those situations where in Judaism, we don't have a desire for everybody to be Jewish. We believe that everybody has the same like ability, quote unquote, to go to whatever you want to call heaven in English or whatever. It's not like you have to be Jewish to get there, which is why there's no Jewish missionaries theoretically. And I'm not saying that there's anything wrong with other religions doing that. I'm just saying in general, Judaism, if you're Jewish, they might want you to be a part of that and the culture and the customs and whatever. But if you're not, so it's like, my father even ended up being he ended up helping many passengers that had survived, just discuss their experience. And very famously, I referred to the man as I call him the plane crash rabbi. He came from Omaha, Nebraska down. But to get back on topic, yeah, it was an experience where everyone felt something spiritual on some level. I remember talking to anybody that was on the flight, including the captain, who stayed in touch with me even while I was in very religious Jewish schools and stuff. He used to call me if I needed, if I really needed to talk to somebody. He would get on the phone with me. It was just an unbelievable thing. But yeah, I was one of the. I was considered the youngest to have. There were a few interviews done by a couple other survivors that had been that young, but the interview they eventually did with me later on in my life is one of the. It's one of them that sticks out, and my specific story, as we will eventually get into, is also unique in its own right. So
the reason I wanted to talk about your age and your memory was the idea that these are true memories of you. So we hear an explosion, and what happens in the plane at that point in time? Is it just total chaos? Is it total calm?
For a few moments, it was like chaos and shock at the same time. It was almost like it was like there was like this free fall. I remember there were people that were like screaming for like a moment, and then what I remember so clearly is feeling like we were falling, and I was wondering in my mind, like, is this going to stop? Like, to the falling. Right after that, it really was an amazing job by the stewardess, the whole crew, to really keep everyone as calm and composed as possible. Eventually, after all the time that was going on, I have even clearer memories of what was going on, but it's clear as day in my mind, from that moment, literally, that we heard that explosion. up until, the end, including the crash itself. But that moment was it's a significant moment in my life, that free fall. A lot, I lost the fear of, my mom pointed out that there's a couple of movies that were made. One of them was called Fearless. It was with Jeff Bridges, the dude from, and that movie, they actually used essentially my story. The very beginning of that movie was based upon me, this little boy that's in a crash, and after that, he's not scared of anything. I lost the fear of like physical danger after that, but I gained a different fear of like socially. It affected me more than anything else. But yeah, I remember that like in the moment, I would actually say, ironically, that was probably the scariest part for me. The scariest part was that first explosion and that first drop. Like I just felt like we were in it. From my personal experience, I felt like we were literally dropping out of the sky.
Yeah. So with that, I imagine that there are commands and preparations that are going throughout the cabin, of the idea that it's not just everybody assume the crash position. There's much more detail, I think, going on, and much more going on in that spectrum.
Yeah, 45 minutes of it, 45 minutes of coordination and the crew working together to literally like miraculously do everything they did. I mean, they were phenomenal. The entire crew was absolutely phenomenal. Absolutely, just like unbelievable. Real heroes, like real life heroes.
Yep.
Real life heroes.
100% agree with that. I do have kind of a list of the flight crew that was there, and we may talk about it, and if that jars any memories. But so one of the stories I remember was that they were telling the parents, because there were a lot of it was children fly for $1. Many of these children were on laps, right? And it just happens that flight protocol, which sounds contraindicated, but it probably is the right thing. Put your child on the floor, that without a seatbelt, and try to hold him down to the floor is one of the things. And that was something I thought, wow, how do you get a mother to put their mother or father to put their child on the floor? And it probably still is the right thing to do, but it just sounds so contraindicated because you want to smother them in love, thinking these are the last moments, right?
It was really difficult for a lot of the parents talk about how difficult that was for them, and yeah, it's really rough.
Eventually this plane is going to crash. Were you conscious the entire time, or did you lose consciousness?
I did not lose consciousness at all, even though I had very severe head trauma. But if I lost consciousness, I don't recall meaning I don't recall there being this like lapse of time in my mind. It was the famous book Flight 232 talks about it, but I mean, my recollection is clear as day as to exactly what happened. You bring up a good point, though. I think that the first moment that I realized that I really do believe that after, like, my thought process was like after that initial crash, it was, I believe that there was an aspect of belief once they started saying that things will be okay. There was this aspect of belief that, like, all those initial instructions, when anybody gets on a plane, when the stewardess or when the pilot explains, or the stewardess explains all the protocol. I remember that when the man sitting next to me told me that we had to switch seats because he had to be by the exit, because I was in the aisle and he was at the window, and he's like, "We're gonna have to switch seats." It was after he had a discussion with the stewardesses, and I still till this day believe it was also with the pilot, but it's hard to know exactly. It was just messages passed back and forth, but he made a conscious choice to switch seats. And it was really at that point where I realized, like, he's not doing this to open up the exit door. I didn't get the feeling like he believed he'd be opening up an exit door. The way that he was treating me, interestingly enough, so that prayer, the traveler's prayer, so there's different customs as to when to say the prayer. A lot of people say it right when you're taking off. Other people say it like right when you get above the clouds. My dad had taught me to say that prayer right after um, I get above the clouds. And so I had asked the gentleman sitting next to me, Richard Howard Sudlow, may he rest in peace.
Yep.
I had asked him to just let me know, when are we going to be above the clouds? And he let me know, and I had said the prayer. And I'll never forget that when he switched seats with me, right after he had switched seats with me, and he had left the seat for a little bit to have a discussion, so that I couldn't hear the discussion with one of the stewardesses. You'll list the flight, but it was Susan White and Donna McGrady were the two main stewardesses that I recall being a part of, like, orchestrating the act of saving my life. When he said to me, you know what, I noticed in your prayer book that there's English and Hebrew, which is true. Like, the prayer book, I still have that prayer book. And on the right side of the page is the Hebrew, and on the left side is a direct translation. In case you don't know Hebrew and you just want to read it in English, we don't believe God just listens to, like, God doesn't just have this, like, thing where it's like he only hears one language. He hears every language that could even potentially exist. That's our belief. I say that as a Jew. When he said to me, you know what, I think, I want to say that prayer with you again. Let me see let's say it together again. Let's say that prayer again. I realized that things weren't going to be, the plans that they were discussing about landing on some level in some crazy fashion, which they were very honest about, that there was going to be no landing gear, and that there would definitely be some form of impact. And they didn't pretend like that wasn't going to occur. But I realized it was more significant than that, especially because for me it felt like the plane kept on dropping every time they were making those banks to the right. They kept banking to the right. One of the I'm by no means a scientist, but there was even an article written, I believe it was MIT or one of the big universities that discusses this type of event. They discuss the notion that the pilot was allowing the plane to drop on some level so that people could actually jump, like, so that we would actually gain altitude. So for every 5,000 that we dropped, the pilot was utilizing the wings. It brought us up 10,000 or something like that. I'm not giving you the exactly. And this gave the ability for the plane to stay in the air for the period of time that they kept it in the air. And so, it was the culmination of a bunch of different things that were going on all at the same time that led me to believe that we weren't going to be having just some emergency landing.
Right.
I remember believing right away that this was going to be bad. I remember thinking that in my head. I remember thinking about my parents, which we can get into more detail eventually about that. But I remember thinking about my parents, like, they got to know where I am, where I'm going to be, and oh no, people are going to worry. And there were a lot of thoughts going through my mind at the time, but I definitely didn't believe that things were going to be okay.
And by the way, quite a reasonable belief, and I would say that a very forward-thinking belief for a 9-year-old, right? The adults, and the idea that the adults have to hold it together too, because the adults have to also know this is not going to be good, right? That all warning is, if you're a prayerful person, you better get busy, right?
That's what I'd say. Like once during the 45 minutes of chaos, you know, it just appeared to me like people were either praying or drinking, and when I say that, it brings a smile on some level to my face too, because it's kind of, it's kind of a funny thing to say. It's one of the things I say a lot, but that was I thought, like later when I understood that, I thought that was the right thing. If they needed, everybody on the flight needed to be in whatever place they needed to be to survive and to help others survive in the process. And so that was my experience. I just remember things were flying everywhere, for points, for periods of time in the flight. Things were just like flying all over the place, and then at other periods of time, it was somewhat calm, but there were a lot of people, kind of softly crying, after I believe the adults recognized that it was going to be, a disaster. They really did their best to stay composed so that those of us who they were trying to hide
Right.
the
Rely
reality
upon
from.
adult affectation, right? That the adult
Very, very
affectation is what
correct.
the child is going to pick up on, right?
That's
Yeah,
exactly
that
right.
it's a different story, but right, you get the toddler who falls over and bumps his head maybe, and everybody goes, oh, that's what really makes a child. To me, that's what makes a child cry. That it probably isn't the immediate impact. It's just that, oh my gosh, everybody around me just made me think that something bad is happening. So
There's a lot of psychology behind that.
uh,
A lot. There's a lot of beliefs with regards to that. That yeah, depending on how you respond um, to the incident, very often the child will be
right.
responding based upon your response.
Yeah. By the way, I just want to tell everybody that's out there, I am not somebody who's giving you information that says don't react when a child bumps their head. Get them medical help, right?
Yeah.
So, but the idea that usually the reaction is greater than needed in that situation. So now we're coming to the ground. We've made it to the ground. How do you get out of this plane?
So so what happened was the stewardess and the pilot as well. So this gentleman sitting next to me, Richard Howard Sudlow, like literally like an angel, like a true angel. Um, he switched seats with me, and um, his name was called out prior to us actually hearing brace, 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 which the pilot yelled out. And it's kind of my recollection. This is the way that I felt, and this is kind of like the way that I remember it. It's pretty close to what they understand actually occurred, but I really do feel like there was an aspect where he kind of like unbuckled himself, unbuckled me, and buckled himself on top of me, and he knew. I feel a lot of guilt um, taking, or his life was taken, but I would not be here without him. He shielded me in the book, which was also very scientifically written. It wasn't just like, it wasn't simply people's experiences. It was very scientifically written. He in the book, Professor Lawrence Gonzalez describes it as Richard Howard Sudlow acted as the shock absorber for Yisroel Brownstein, for me. And so it was really horrific. The plane hit the ground like you guys saw, and it they believe it bounced a couple times actually, and then it split into multiple pieces. And the tail end of the section, which I was in the last seat, rolled about 300 yards from where the initial impact was. So the second strongest memory I have of the plane crash was the rolling. I just remember feeling like I was going to mention this before, like I don't have a lot of fear of like physical danger. There are other things happen in my life that Wendy happens to know about. Right now is not the time to bring them all up, but I've been through other traumatic incidences. It's not the physical fear that I have, but I don't go on roller coasters. And the reason is it's mostly because it's not speed. So like for some people it's speed. It's that free fall or that rolling. And we rolled 300 yards. And I just remember just like that initial explosion where I felt like, when are we going to stop falling? This was just like, it came to a point where I was just like this is just going to roll till it's over, because we were just rolling so fast and with such momentum, and we just kept rolling for about 300 yards till it came to a stop. And at that point, the people in the section where it had broken off that were, um, I'll refer to it as the first seats, the seats that were the closest to the open, because there was just a gaping hole in my section. Um, I remember there was like wires and stuff everywhere, and there's a specific smell that I still smell even when I get on the airplane that has a tremendous effect on me. But we rolled about 300 yards, and then when we finally came to a stop, um, a lot of people perished in my section, obviously. That were right there, but there were certain people that were able to be rescued, and they were taken off from their seats. Now, the way that it had basically sat, like at the end, I was sort of buried beneath. It was told to me 6 feet of rubble. And when I was a kid, I'm sure it was like this when Wendy was a kid. Anybody from, I guess, Gen X who grew up without a cell phone will remember that if your parents always told you their phone number and your address in case you ever got lost. My mom did, at least. She used to. It was like in my brain, like my address and my phone number, my mom's phone number, and my parents' phone number, and they were kind of running away from my section to keep trying to help however much they could in other areas, because you have to realize that my section was so far off from the runway which they are using the tarmac as like a point for EMS, emergency medical services. I see Amy put it up there. That's true. There's a chart. It's actually a very good way to if you guys want to see, the chart. But the point is, they were able to grab people alive, dead, those that perished. They were able to grab certain people, and I was still buried. And it appeared to most that there was no one left to go back for at that point. But I was screaming. The bathroom door had basically cut my arm off, my right arm off. It was hanging just by tissue in the inside of my elbow, the crux, whatever you call it, just that aspect of my limb. It was still attached, but the bones were all like severed, and my arm was hanging, and I remember blood just pouring down my face. I remember my eye. It just felt like it almost felt like as if you're like filling a glass with water. My eye felt like it was just filling up with blood, and that is what happened. Like there at one point, like I remember they showed me a mirror at one point in the hospital. I had finally requested to see what I looked like, and one of my eyes, it just looked like a red marble. That's what one of my eyes looked like, and I still bear the scars from that. You might not be able to see it well, but I don't have an eyebrow, and you could see it was sliced. There was actually 4 spots where bolts flew. They flew through Richard Howard Sudlow, may he rest in peace. Flew through his body and his head, and they skipped across my face like rocks would skip across. If you were throwing rocks into water. But miraculously, they didn't go through my head, and my arm was hanging there, and I had a skull fracture. I still have a huge dent. I have a few dents in my head still from that injury, and there was just blood. But I was most concerned, and this is the recollection of the Dave Smith, who was the man that finally came. He was a Vietnam vet. He was a medic from the Vietnam War, and he had heard. He kept saying, "I hear someone. I'm going back. I hear someone," because I was screaming on the top of my lungs my mom's phone number, my dad's phone number. I wanted them, and ironically, eventually, they were actually one of the first. They made a staging point in the airport once they heard there were some survivors, and they eventually, they knew that I was alive, partially because I had been screaming so loudly. By the time they heard I was alive, I was probably in surgery or on the way into surgery. But um, Dave Smith, another just angel, just absolute angel out of nowhere, and he bagged my arm, and he carried me out, and got me to the runway. And I'll never forget some of the carnage that I saw. The bodies that were just laying out on the runway, uh, people that they probably tried to. And Wendy and I had this discussion about the exact number, but it, the with respect to all those that and they should never be forgotten, the 112. So there was 112 people that essentially perished, like basically from that impact. There was one life that was lost very shortly after. So it was 111 plus that individual that I guess he made it to the hospital, but he perished soon after. So there were 112 that day that had passed away, or within a short period of time. It was 111 that like literally perished immediately, pretty much, and then one other life that they were still trying to save, and didn't make it. There's 112 names on a picture that Wendy put up there. There's 112 names with all those that perished. And it's important to remember their names because they're real heroes. I mean, the man sitting next to me, literally, I mean, I wouldn't be here if it wasn't for him. My organs were completely protected by his body. Again, it was just my head that was kind of like popped out and my arms. And I'll never forget the feeling that he was smothering me. That is why I'm pointing to his name in that picture. That's on the wall in the museum. Yeah, I mean, I felt like he was I felt like I couldn't catch a breath, like he was smothering me. And after we stopped rolling, his body was very much on top of mine. They had to eventually, as Dave Smith explained that he had to figure out like sometimes which body parts belong to who as he was pulling people out. It was literally that difficult for him to discern, people that were very close together, and the carnage that was there. He had to make quick decisions as to how to get me out. He knew he saw how badly I was bleeding. He knew he had to get me out really fast. I mean, it was clear to him, and he did. And he got me. Richard Howard Sudlow kept me alive, and then Dave Smith got me to the runway with enough time to stop the blood loss and get me to the hospital.
Yeah, just that the number of things that had to go right. That's it's really hard not to say miracle, whether or not you believe in miracles or not. There's something greater going on in the universe when we talk about planes are rather safe, and many things have to go wrong in order for a plane to have a catastrophic failure like this one did, but it does happen. And then there's the other side of that these certain things have to go right in order for somebody to make it through. And but for the grace of God, right? All of the things lined up that you're sitting before us today, right?
Yeah, it's really crazy if you think about the connection. I refer when I speak, sometimes I'm speaking to various, I've spoken at universities and sometimes religious events. And what I say is I refer to it as unavoidable spirituality.
Yeah.
That's the way I view it. It's like whatever you believe. I'm not saying everybody needs to believe in God, but very famously, one of the most famous rabbis that's ever lived, His name was the Ramban, Nachmanides, they say in English. He asked that famous question of why in Judaism, in the Bible, and in daily life, in all of the acts that we have to do, called mitzvot, which are the positive actions of daily life. The famous, he asked very famously, why are we constantly thinking about and reminding ourselves of the miracles that happened in Egypt? It's one of the most famous things that Jews end up discussing. And it's exactly like Wendy was saying. It's that his simple answer is, he says in Hebrew, "Min hanisim hagedolim hamefursamim adam omed b'nisim hanistarim." From the great miracles, from recognizing things that are just blatantly in front of your face, like you can't deny that something crazy just occurred, then you start to recognize that waking up each day and the way that our bodies function. And one of the greatest examples that I like to use is that our eyes, the way our eyes function, it's just really insane that your eye is about as strong as a grape, yet it takes care of itself and it protects itself. And it's just one of the examples of like daily life that people start to recognize. So that was his famous answer, is that if you recognize the big miracles, like the Exodus, as we say, of
Right.
Egypt, and what Jews believe, or people that believe in the Bible, that those seas, there was a splitting of the sea, there were a bunch of events, and as Dr. Jordan Peterson often says, whether you believe that they actually occurred or not, there's a purpose behind the story, that he says. And this rabbi, that was his answer, was like, you become responsible. If a miracle occurs to you in your life, you become responsible to share that with others so that they can start appreciating life for themselves.
Yep.
So if they can recognize this crazy thing that occurred, they start saying to themselves, wow, I was upset about traffic today. And meanwhile, like you said, by the grace of God, that there are people that make it out. I mean, I do believe in God. I was very rebellious. I'm not your typical ultra orthodox individual. I did grow up that way, and I still am. Actually, I'm probably a lot more religious than I appear when it comes to just like daily life. But there's one thing that was for sure. Like even at times when I was like rebelling from what I believed was God's will or whatever it was back then when I was part of the community, there was never a point in my life where I questioned whether or not God existed. It was much more a matter of this cognitive dissonance of this anger that I had. And famously, it was quoted by multiple people that said, it's okay to be angry at God. It's okay to be angry at God. But yeah,
Absolutely.
it's blatant that what happened to me. Well, like you said, all the things that had to line up the chances are astronomical. They're
Right.
astronomical. The speed at which the plane hit the ground, the way the plane hit the ground, there should have been no, based upon any law of physics, there should have been no survivors, let alone, the 184 that are counted as making it off the plane.
Right.
Yeah.
No, I like that. Right.
What do you
And
think?
so the more we see and acknowledge the miracles, the more they occur. Right. And I'm going to tell you that, right, maybe if you follow the channel long enough, I am an ordained minister in a fundamentalist Christian religion.
Mhm.
I will say that I've never been religious. I've always been spiritual, right? There is something bigger than me in the universe is kind of the way that I always look at it.
Yeah, that's the way I view it too. I mean, it's like there's a power, as they say, a higher power. There's something going on.
Yep.
What it is, we don't always have an answer to what it is and how
Might turn out
to.
that it's just dark matter, but it's still bigger than me, right?
Yeah, it's something. It's some force of energy that's that's kind of helping. I don't know exactly how to say it without it, because it's not just a religious thing for me. It is also a religious thing for me, but on many levels, it's just like there's got to be some kind of a plan going on out there in the world. That's kind of the best way for me to explain. It's like, there's something out there that's doing something to create all these um, everything that happens down here, and it becomes easy to lose sight of that when we as a human race go through some horrific experiences, which we have. You look at a day like 9/11 or other historic. If you look at World War II and the amount of death, if you look at any wars going on right now, I stay out of politics as much as I can, but any loss of life is just it's horrific. But sometimes it becomes important to recognize the unavoidable spirituality. That's literally how I refer to it. It's spirituality. It's like you can't deny. I can't. I'd be in denial if I said that what happened to me is not miraculous.
Yeah.
That would be complete denial. Like whatever happened to me was miraculous.
Yeah. So one thing, I think that I'm very much engaged by the story, and I know that there's another chapter that's much more important. And well, let's see here. Not there. Let's see here. I want to stay present to the particular accident, and I'll say that since the accident, there have been other stories. Right, there are reunions, there are memorials that occur, and I think that's an important story that we talk about as well. But I want to ask the audience, right? Would you be okay if we talk a little bit more about what happened on the day of, and then we actually have another conversation later on? Is this something that's interesting to all of us? I'll say I'm intrigued, and whether or not you want to have a live about it, let's go to the bar and let's have a beer and let's talk about this. And I know that that you don't have to have a beer at the bar, but
right.
Okay.
No, I know you're sincere about it. You've always been, yeah.
So
very sincere.
There's some I want to address where we talked about this idea that it's not only the crew, but the crew.
Can I ask you a quick question? Yes. This is like I was referring to before. This is like me being on the spectrum. Like it's not a big deal. But I'm just curious, how many people are in the chat right now?
We've got 20. It's 20 people in the chat. We've been between 20 and 30 most of the
That's
evening.
Awesome. That's awesome. That's beautiful. That's awesome.
And again, that it's everybody. Like I said, I think it's somber, right? So there's an awful lot of people lurking and talking. They'll chime up in that space. So I definitely want to have this now. I'm bringing up this page because this is the actual flight crew, and something I want to make sure that everybody understands that that not only the flight crew, but all of the survivors and all of the people that rushed to the scene are also reasons why that we have these survivors. But I would just like to kind of call out some of the people that that worked for the airlines and again, I think they were essential in regards to what's going on. And just what is your remembrance of some of these people? And again, I'm going to start off with Captain Al Haynes.
I was blessed to be able to, when I was well enough to go see him in the hospital, they rolled me in this like very long hospital bed, but they I mean, I was 9 years old, I was a little kid, but they had me kind of like sitting up, and I got to speak to the pilot for the first time, the cap, and we developed an instantaneous relationship. I also recall getting on the flight, because again, it was significant that I was even flying. That for me, that was like a significant day.
Right.
Had there been no plane crash, it still would have been the first memory of flight, and he was welcoming everybody as they came on the plane. You have to really imagine a huge cockpit. DC-10 is a big plane. It's 2 seats on each side and then 5 seats in the middle. That's how the plane is set up.
Right.
So it's a big crew, and I'll never forget one of the things that I told my parents was that he had said hello, like when we were coming onto the plane. He really like gave me like that, like I'm a little kid, and he was like, hi. But I developed a relationship with him immediately, and I held on to that relationship with dear life. um, uh, um, until his later years before he passed away. Um, I'm so blessed that even after I fell through in life and the trauma affected me greatly after, years of it not affecting me in that really like life falls apart kind of way, I'm really blessed that he was still around. He was still around to talk to, and he was always willing. He was always ready. I kind of always imagine him as like probably saying things like, I want to talk as much, however much he wants to talk to me. I want to talk at least that much back with him. I just can imagine him saying things like that. He was just such an unbelievable human being. His personality, just everything about him was just so incredible, like real life hero. I mean, anybody that believes in our country, and honors those who have served, and we're talking about a man that flew for majority of the branches in the military, and
Yep.
and just an incredible human being, and was always willing to talk to me about anything from my daily life and not even bringing up the crash to actually speaking head on about what actually occurred. I'll never forget, he called one day when he had heard that I was having a really difficult time in life. He had gotten through to, I believe it was actually one of the rabbis in my community. He had gotten through to, and I was put back in touch with him. It might have been my parents. Um, Shannon's going to eventually interview my mom. My mom can answer that better than I can, who it was, but somebody reconnected me with him, and all I can say is like he continued to save my life throughout my life. His existence continued to give me a lot of hope that things could get better, because I can't imagine. I mean, not only was he in the crash, he felt so responsible for every little aspect of it.
One thing I want to remind the audience is that my recollection is that Al Haynes was not the pilot in charge that day. Oftentimes when planes take off, one pilot's going to be the pilot in charge and one's going to be radio navigator. And that's just so that you can get hours back and forth in that space.
Well, I believe actually, I believe I could be incorrect about this, because there's a lot of things that I've been told like different ways, but this I'm sure is something you could easily just Google. But I believe he was the crazy part of where there was a cap that came out of nowhere was in first class. There was a pilot sitting in first class.
Dennis
And
Fitch.
yes, correct, Dennis Fitch. And he was sitting in first class, and he was like an engineer, and he taught flight. And he just happened to be on that airplane. And he went up to the cockpit, and you guys can Google the black box, but essentially it was like, he was trying to ask if we could do anything, and Captain Al Haynes kept saying, "There's nothing you could do. We lost all our jobs." And Dennis Fitch, he recognized that. He knew. He's like, I understand, and I just want to do whatever I can. I mean, to the point of let's rip up the floorboards and whatever we need to do.
Right.
And he was there in a huge support role as well. There were other pilots in there, because I remember the size of the cockpit, and if you're in the museum ever, you can see how big it is. It's tremendous. I mean, there's room for about 5 people to sit, literally comfortably. But Captain Haynes was definitely the captain that took full control, and he definitely takes responsibility. And I don't mean that in a heroic way. He takes it responsibility where he feels that guilt of all those that didn't make it.
Yeah. At the end of the day, the captain is the person in charge of the plane, 100%. But I think that
Are you referring to Dvorak? Are you referring to Dvorak?
No, I thought it was Records that was actually flying. There was also, I remember there's on that plane, there would have been a navigator as well in the cockpit.
So I should put out this caveat. You have to understand something. I want to say this really quick so people understand, like, how does Israel not even know what it was? So for a long time, my parents thought that the best thing to do was just shield me from the whole thing. And I don't blame them at all. I don't think that they were it. I don't think there's one way for anybody. And it's something I was going to talk about. It's what made me feel so passionate about working with people in Scientology. And I always say on my channel, anybody who wants to reach out, it's not hard to find me. I love being. I feel like I was put in this world to connect to people on that level, and I wish that people would reach out to me on a much more significant level if they wanted to. Just experiencing trauma. But my parents made a choice, like a very conscious choice, to keep me kind of disconnected from everybody else. And I don't know if this is something we'll get to today, but I wasn't even I didn't even meet the daughter of Richard Howard Sudlow, the man sitting next to me, and she suffered tremendously. I mean, I hope she sees this. I always hope that she's watching. I can't answer, but I wasn't even allowed to meet her for about 2 years after the plane crash, until my parents decided it was time to actually meet her, which is an incredible story in and of itself. She's an incredible human being, Michelle. But yeah, I mean, it's exactly like you were saying. I mean, essentially, I don't know all of the details because I only started studying exactly what occurred much later in my life. So there are aspects that have been like told to me, which like I didn't even realize it was like this. Recently on Friday, the gentleman that spoke, he did a pretty good job of explaining everything. I believe the way that he explained it was that Captain Haynes was the one that kind of was like literally holding on to the controls as if like nothing else mattered. That's how he spoke of it, and that is how it's spoken in the book. But there were other people in the cockpit that were just as heroic in their own way. So you're definitely correct about that. I do believe he was like the senior pilot. I think that's for sure.
He was. Yep, he was.
Okay.
And like what'll happen oftentimes on a flight, the most senior pilot won't fly because they're trying to give time to the other pilot, the junior pilot in that situation. So
I understand what you meant now. I misunderstood you. I
So,
misunderstood
yeah,
you.
you're
Yes,
100%,
yes, yes.
but the most
I
accountable
misunderstood
person
you.
on that plane would have been Al Haynes. And
Right?
what it was is that as soon as things went wrong, he was the person that grabbed the yoke and tried to make sure that he could feather the engines. And then they communicated back and forth several times, talking with also this engineer, Dennis Fitch, that was on there trying to get us down. There is a great, like I said, that it's in the description of this video. Pilot mentor or mentor pilot. He's somebody who he currently is a 737 pilot, but he likes to take the NTSB reviews of all kinds of accidents that occur and kind of break it down and help people understand here's what went wrong and why things why things occurred the way
He
they did.
does a great job. People have kids who are interested in this type of stuff have done a phenomenal job of breaking down his breakdown on TikTok.
Yeah.
I don't even have really. I don't have. I mean, officially, it's on my phone. For some reason, I can't get into it anymore. Ironically, but I was ushered to TikTok because so many people wanted to hear me respond. There are hundreds of videos and literally hundreds of videos of breaking it down, and his breakdown is used more than anyone else's. The way that he broke it down. So that is very great. And I do want to say that I misunderstood Wendy. I misunderstood Paul. I'm just so used to calling you Wendy before you got doxxed by Scientology.
I answered to both.
Yeah, I answered to both. Yeah, so I misunderstood. Yes, absolutely. There were other pilots that were. Yeah, he was more initially like, let's say, I don't know how to say this in a way where it's not like he was disconnected. He was kind of sitting back initially. Yes, that is true, and it's not. And it's not like another pilot made a mistake. There were no mistakes
100%.
made by these pilots. There was nothing that everything they did was only positive. It was not their fault, as this gentleman who recently spoke on Friday, and I say gentleman because my frontal lobe was affected tremendously and my short-term memory is actually very bad. So if you tell me a name, it'll take me a long time for me to remember his name, but I just had met him on Friday. But he spoke on Friday at the museum, the famous museum. And he actually did a pretty decent job of explaining that aspect of things. And And it's exactly like you said. That is true. And then Captain Al Haynes did jump in, and he did take. Yeah, that is the proper way. He took the yoke. He absolutely did. And they really were. I mean, they were doing everything they could to whatever little power they had. By the way, you did a phenomenal job of explaining it's exactly what happened. There were 3 slices in the hydraulic line. That's the way it's reported. 3 separate slices in the hydraulic line, which inevitably led to 0 hydraulics, which is literally what you need. You know, there's something interesting someone sent me over the weekend. There's this machine. You guys should feel more than welcome to do this. It's really it was sent to me because of my experience, but there was this machine that was created as a museum exhibit. I don't know if you know about this, Paul, but there's this museum. I forgot where it exists, somewhere in Europe. And the museum, the machine has basically like an arm on it, and it's able to reach only so far. And spread around the machine is hydraulic fluid that it needs for it to exist. Right. So if it doesn't collect the hydraulic fluid, so essentially this machine continues to collect however much hydraulic fuel it needs to actually exist. So it collects its own hydraulic fluid, and it's just a really stark reminder on how planes and any machinery like that cannot operate without hydraulics. It's literally like trying to drive a car without gas and without oil and without imagine taking all the fluids you need. The pilots at that point didn't care about gas. That wasn't, in fact, they were dumping it so that, it would they were dumping fuel. They weren't,
but hydraulics, it's a liquid is uncompressible, and therefore a small push on one end is always relayed to the other end. And it's the idea that it's a leveraged force. And without the hydraulic ability, that's what cranes what cranes work on it, but back.
And by the way, that machine I just described, it looks like a crane.
Yeah,
it's exactly what it looks like.
And it's really amazing how much force it will bring to bear. And if you don't have the hydraulic fluid, the mechanical energy necessary to do that is beyond 1,000 humans to be able to do that work. I'll tell you what I'd really like to do right now is, again, I think that we've gone through quite a bit of this. And I do want to come back and I want to say, hey, let's talk about what the aftermath of the crash was. So what's happened since the crash? How do we make sure that we keep the memories of these people that are the lost souls in mind in regards to this? How do we tell the story? And there's also some the way that I'll say it is that there was a crash. There was a large or there was an expensive corporation that would have been there would have been plenty of lawsuits, and there would have been settlements and things of that nature. And we know that lawyers get involved in certain situations, and maybe things went the right way, maybe they didn't go the right way. But I'd love to have that discussion as well in this. But are there any other things that you remember about the day of the crash that
first of all, I like your approach. It's also helping keep my emotions as regulated as possible. I always just want to break down, but I'm not holding back. I don't want anybody to think that I'm holding back tears. There was a time in my life where I couldn't. Like, if you guys find the interview, and I literally don't even look physically healthy at that time, and I was kind of putting my life back together. The first time that they interviewed me as an adult. So I do appreciate the way that the way that we're going through this. It's kind of like I like your perspective on it. So with regards to that day, I remember there were multiple people that the runway was horrific looking to me. I mean, there were people that were still in their seats, like seats that had gotten ripped out of the plane. And it was I just remember looking to the left, looking to the right. I remember they were trying to keep my head in what, everybody calls C-spine, which is like the most, I don't know if I ever told you this, Paul, but another one of the things I did was I went for 2 years straight. I went to school for EMT. I got to work at like the last Jerry Garcia concert. I got to work at Bears games, and a bunch of unique experiences by doing that. But they were doing the best they could. But I just remember they were trying to keep my head still, and I was just screaming for my mom, and I was a little bit focused on my arm, and I found it just like fascinating that my arm was just sitting there the way it was sitting there. And they kept trying to console me, and nothing could really calm me down. I was just really furious that they wouldn't, like, in my 9-year-old brain, call my mom. It's like, stop talking to me, run and call my mom. Like, that's just what I kept thinking. I'm like, my dad's going to want to know too, but my mom needs to know right away. You guys got to go call my mom. I just kept thinking that. I just remember that was like one of the things that ran through. But then once I started looking around, I remember finding myself at like a loss of words. And there was a period of time where I stopped screaming in pain, and I just couldn't believe what I was seeing. I mean, it was bad enough what I saw with Richard Howard Sudlow. May he rest in eternal peace. What a hero. I mean, I literally feel like I took his life. It's beyond just saying a powerful experience to know someone who's not here with you. It's very difficult to wrap your mind around. But on that day, I remember a couple other significant things. Like, one of them was the EMS workers, the main paramedic in the ambulance was also the principal of the grade school in Sioux City. And I remember her very well. I actually have a T-shirt that was signed by all of her students. Just like a regular like Hanes white T-shirt, and they all signed it. And she was really phenomenal, the way that she interacted with me. And I remember there was a couple other, because they only had so much. The resources that they came up with was crazy if you think about it. It's a tiny little city, and it just, like, in the poem that I read, and you guys are more than welcome to go on my channel and check out that poem. I read it in the speech that I gave the other day, and then I read it separately, which I wanted to read it separately, where it came out without, it was read in a more clear fashion. But, what Siouxland did that day is beyond anything. Again, like, you want to talk about the components that all needed to come together for us to survive. A lot of that was very much how Sioux City reacted. And Amy's bringing up a great point. In 1987, in aviation, this was something that was just discussed amongst, all the, anyone within that profession. Like, what would happen if a 747 or a Boeing, whatever, would crash? Like, how can we? And randomly, they had done the drills. They chose that airport randomly, and they had done drills in 1987. And if you look at the timeline in the museum, you'll see the drills in 1987, and then you'll see the actual event in 1989, and you'll see it go through. And you can't even, at certain points, you can't really discern the difference between the two. It's absolutely insane that they were able to do it. And everybody just dropped whatever they were doing to come. And they still, till today, like I tell people, it wasn't just that day that they stopped everything they were doing. Every year when I go back, and it took me a long time to go back, but for the past 8 years I've been going back. Every year I go back, they still drop everything to show up. They still come meet me at the museum. They still set me up at the hotel. The rabbi comes in from Omaha. My friend Dave Bernstein, who runs half of the city in Sioux City, he takes it upon himself to make sure that I have like a very positive experience, throughout the period of time whenever I come to visit. I try not to come in just for one day. It's a little bit too much to take in for one day, but there's always that day when I'm just hanging out with people from the city, and they remember everything so clearly, and they're just unbelievable. It's a phenomenal experience to know that you literally have like a city. I mean, they named the streets by the airport after the captain. It's really, really crazy. So It's yeah, it's just amazing. It does, and Amy's right. I mean, a lot of it just like I'm a believer of also that you kind of need the will to live. You really do need to for you to survive
100%.
something like this. There is a like like they say that they've done studies like people that are very sick, like the people that have the like more of a desire to live for, if there's something to live for, there's a higher statistical there's a higher statistical analysis of the survival of those people or
Correct.
healing. You know, they say about cancer, just as an example. I remember reading this in a book when I was in graduate school. That the statistics of surviving cancer go up by a certain percentage based upon what you have to live for. I want to be careful when I say that because that's not to say that people that pass didn't have the desire to live.
Correct.
It's just an
Correct.
interesting. It's just an interesting thing to think about. I by no
Right.
means.
Most of this community, right? Most of the community, we've just lost somebody to cancer, and he had a great deal to live for. Cancer got a huge head start on him. That's that's really what happened.
Yeah, there's no question about that. I don't want it to think. I don't want anybody to think that I believe like, oh well, if you passed, that means you didn't have something to live for. I'm just pointing out that you do need that component, and Sioux City gave that to us. They made us feel like, like you'll always have a home. You'll always, no matter what happens in life, you can always come back here. You
Right.
know, I
Yep.
mean, the cab drivers, it's crazy when they, like, I feel like I'm Michael Jordan when I'm there. Like, I'm like, you know, they really roll out the red carpet and they just, I got this year was really beautiful. Somebody sponsored me in the hotel, and anybody that watched my live saw that I was staying in one of the nicest hotels I've ever been to, and I've been to some pretty nice hotels around the world. Um, and I was just interacting with people at the hotel, and every single person there, like, they knew who I was, they knew about the accident, and there were times where I was having a conversation with some people playing this sport, this very professional sport, and they had rented some of the land off of that was still a part of the hotel. And I
Right.
was talking to them, and I just mentioned, like, oh yeah, this is why I'm here, you know, and it wasn't like they didn't see me. They're like, we know who you are, like, what I
That's
mean? It
awesome.
was like, yeah, like I was like a part because they made me feel so much a part of their family, and I wanted to let them know that's so sweet of you guys to make me feel so comfortable. They were going to let me play that game they call cornhole or
Oh yeah,
baggers.
yeah. Yep.
So, and
That's
they have real leagues, like they have a huge
oh
thing
yeah.
out there.
It's on
It's
TV
just
sometimes.
it is. It's like on ESPN. This is like a
Yep.
series. I met some people like those beanbags that they throw. The guy
Yep.
was showing me that they're hundreds of dollars for a set of four. I
Yep.
mean, it's really crazy. And it was just funny that I was talking to them. I was talking to two gentlemen in particular that were teammates, and they were about to go out. And I'm like, well, I'll cheer for you guys. I just want you to. And they were like, oh yeah, I thought you realized we know who you are. Like it wasn't even like they knew who I was. They knew what I was doing there, and it was just yeah. That day was just like I remember feeling like so what I was going to get to, but I want to say this first. When I came out of surgery, I'll never
Right.
forget the unbelievable feeling um, of being alive and surviving, and that my mom could see me alive, even though she didn't realize that she was going to come and see me in such horrific fashion. The fact that but I remember this: they weren't able to give me proper anesthesia because there were a few surgeries that were done before mine. Um, like literally minutes before mine. But they had there were a few people that went into a coma
Right.
from being given the anesthesia in addition to the head trauma that they sustained. So they chose not to give me your typical anesthesia. And so I remember being in surgery, and they really had to like strap me down to do the surgery. Um, and again, I was really focused on like reuniting with my family. I was worried that my younger siblings would be worried. They were too young to really understand. And I was absolutely mortified what my older sister would have been going through at the time. At that time, I thought my younger sister, Sarah, Suri, we call her, would not have, but she has just as clear memories. But I didn't want her to come. But I allowed my older sister to come visit me, um, when I was in the hospital. But I remember, that on that day, that's what I just kept thinking about. And then when I came out of surgery and they had doped me up, like they should have,
Yes.
very much appropriately. But I'll never forget on that day feeling like ET, like in a bubble, where like
Gotcha.
they didn't want people near me because of germs, yet everybody was kind of standing there hovering over. My mom
That
is one of
close,
the most,
right?
yeah, my mom, I'm going to let Shannon interview my mom to tell her perspective. It wouldn't even be fair for me to do this. My mom talked a little on my channel while I was there, but um, she's going to be interviewed properly, which is really cool, actually, Paul. By the way,
Yeah.
that you're interviewing me and Shannon interviewing my mom, I think it's really appropriate. It's really cool. It makes me really happy. But one of the things that I'll never forget is my mom coming into the room, like, dying to see me, and then she herself fainted when she saw me, and she ended up, when I had gone back in like 2016, I went to the hospital, and I just wanted to know my records, like if they still had my records. Well, they're like, which Brownstein? And I'm thinking in my head, like, how is there more than one? Like, what are you talking about? My mom was officially a patient in the hospital because she had fainted. And so
Gotcha.
they had to tend to her. And, even though they were able to help her very quickly, she actually became she
She was under
herself
care.
became
Right.
yeah,
Yeah, she was under care. Nice.
a victim of it, a victim of yeah, under their care. Exactly correct. Yeah. So I guess that's like my most distinct memories were what I shared about being on the flight, being on the tarmac, the ride to the hospital, and then I remember the doctors trying to explain to me that things were going to really hurt while I was in surgery, but that they were going to make me feel comfortable after.
Yeah.
And when they did surgery on my arm, I remember them telling me, um, I remember them telling me um, like they wanted to be honest with me. They said you'll probably have about like 3% use of your arm. We're mostly putting it back so that aesthetically. Um, and later on, it was said in the best words possible. But I remember thinking to myself, "There's no way I'm not going to be playing sports or whatever," because I was
Right.
so into sports as a kid. And I'll never forget both John Elway and Michael Jordan both said to me, "Doctors don't always know everything." He said, if you want to continue to play ball, you'll play ball. And ironically, I have 97% usage of my arm, and I did play ball. I
Nice.
very much did. Yeah.
Like
I played
I
officially the equivalent of college ball in Israel.
yeah. I do not want anybody to say that I'm trying to equate trauma or match trauma. But when I was in 8th grade, I was hit by a car.
Oh,
And
wow.
the doctors had said to me that it's unlikely you'll ever walk without a cane. And I was a rather successful runner. It's sort of that F you, I'm going to
Anybody that doesn't know Windy, he walks around perfectly fine with a backpack and a gimbal. And oh, that's incredible. You never shared that with me. That's incredible.
and it is that idea that said, I'm a kid. I'm going to do what I want to do. Right. And the same thing with you, right? I'm going to play sports.
And that's it. Like I'm playing football, I'm playing basketball. And for the first year, at least, I had a cast on my arm, like from my shoulder, all the way from my
Yeah.
shoulder down. And here I could show you guys this. I had like, I don't even know how many. I don't know. At one point they said it was like 15 or something. I don't know if you guys can see this clearly, but this is a ring that I wore later as my, like towards the end of,
Right.
I wore this as my wedding ring or whatever. What it is it's a surgical plate that, if you imagine this not as a ring, but rolled out flat. And so you're looking at each one of those grooves. There's a screw that's put in each, and they turned it into a ring. But I had multiple of those in. I made one for my daughter. I made one for my wife, my ex. There are multiple people that have a ring that was created from metal that was inside. I still have the pins that were holding my arm together, and
Yeah.
I do remember. I do remember being frustrated that they had that, like, I didn't expect them to have to literally put the cast up all the way to my shoulder. And I was very frustrated with them on that day, the way that they kind of restricted all my movement. And then when my parents came, my mom and dad wanted to just, grab me and hug me, and they couldn't. They just couldn't.
Yeah, that's got to be the most traumatic thing. And similar to what Amy was just saying, that my child is right there. I need to go be with them. And it's like, no, you can't, right? That sorry. And it's the
Exactly
right
correct.
call. It's just impossible to think that a parent would be able to rationalize that idea that my child's right there. You can't say no. I'm going over there.
You want to hear one of the most incredible things that I've ever heard? This speaks right to it. So people know that Johnny Depp goes around and he puts on that costume from being the pirate,
Right.
and very famously he visits hospitals all the time with kids that have like terminal cancer and stuff like that. And one day somebody just commented to him and said to him, it's incredible what you do. You give so much joy to these children. And he stopped and he said, I don't come for the kids. The kids are strong. They have the resilience. I show up for the parents because I know if the kid's going to smile, the parents will. I'm there
Right.
for the parents. The kids is like a side, side agenda. The agenda is for the parents. That's what his response was.
I
Yeah.
like that.
I thought that was extremely profound. And in my life, I can tell you that both my parents, my mom and my dad, suffer still till this day tremendously, constantly worried about so many different things. And my mom especially went through absolute hell on multiple occasions in my life, but that was the first of them. And like you said, it was extremely difficult for them to keep that distance when they wanted so badly when she wanted so badly to just hold me in her arms.
Yep. Absolutely.
That was very difficult. And that was that day. That's what I was getting to. So that all happened that day. I would say that 4 o'clock is right about when the plane crashed. My mom was at the hospital. During summer, the sun is out pretty late. My mom showed up. I believe, if I recall correctly, I was annoyed with the sun because my eyes immediately got affected by this. Like, I remember I never used to get to watch TV as a child because I grew up religious. There was no television. But like when I was in the plane crash, there was a TV and I was allowed to watch TV. And I remember there was a movie on called The Princess Bride. Do you remember that movie?
Yes. Yes.
And you killed my father, prepare to die. Anyway,
You
I
don't
remember
love my lawyer.
yeah. So that's right. That's right. That's exactly correct. I'll never forget that like at one point he pulled out the sword. There was just like a shine to it, like this effect that they wanted to have in the film. And any little light was like absolutely like not just bothering me, it was like beyond just giving me headaches. And I mean, it was just absolutely, it was really bad. And I point this out because it was like, I remember the sun was essentially setting and my mom was already in the hospital. So they had gotten my mom there from, pretty swiftly by for sure. But by like 9 o'clock, my mom was there,
Right.
which is
How
only
did
5 hours.
she was coming from Chicago, right?
Yeah. No,
Okay.
Denver.
Okay.
She was coming
So,
from Denver.
she was behind you.
My
Oh, that's
family
right.
at that
Yep.
that time we lived in Denver.
Yep.
We moved to Chicago after that summer, so she was
Yep.
coming from Denver, and it's a much quicker flight than our flight took longer because of all the loops till we
That's pretty
crashed.
impressive. Yeah.
Yeah, but yeah, they got her there within and I give them credit. I give United credit. They have 2 staging areas in Denver International Airport, and my mom can tell her story on her own about what happened with her that day. But to their credit, they got my mom and some of the other parents or family members of those that survived, especially because I'll just say that for my fellow survivor Jonathan, very close with son. I won't say last names. I'll just say Jonathan and Avi, and just watching their parents perish in front of them. Now Avi's older
Right.
sister, she doesn't have any memories of this. She's in the slide show that Wendy put out there. I'm pictured in there. If you guys see a picture of me standing next to a pretty tall blonde girl, that's Avi. She was a fellow survivor, but she was also in a coma, so she doesn't remember it. Her brother Jonathan was one of the few people that was protected so well that he had almost no injuries, and he had to live with every single memory of watching his family perished right before his eyes.
Right. Survivor's trauma is a real thing. It's a huge thing. And the idea that not only it's survivor's trauma, but having had to watch your loved ones perish.
That survivor's guilt, it will eat, if you don't address it, it will eat your life up. It will eat your life up. This is why I'm such an advocate of, and let Scientology hate my guts.
Right.
Purely based upon the fact that I'm a psychologist. You know what I'm saying? Great. Wonderful. That way, anyone coming out of a situation like that, anybody with that form of trauma, seek the attention and the help you need. You have no clue the effects that trauma has on even the smallest details of your life.
Yep.
And, I really, my kids were severely affected by the plane crash. Like I didn't fall apart till a little bit later in life. My kids were both born by that time, and they had such a difficult experience to watch their dad,
Yep.
During that really bad time in my life.
Yeah, I agree with this 100%, Amy. And Amy, thank you for being such an advocate and making sure that you're a great PR person for him, and you're making sure that the message is being heard. And I really appreciate that. MD Media as well on this space.
Yeah, MDMA. I call MDMA.
Yeah.
MD Media, MDMA, nice. And Amy are Amy's my only mod. I don't have like one of my channels is like totally disconnected from me, and that runs itself. But the only channel the channel that I mostly respond to, the channel that I'm on, it's the channel that I'm looking at right now. Wendy set it up properly. I'm not good at this type of stuff, so I'm grateful that it's there. But Amy literally, she takes care of my channel like by herself, and she does a phenomenal job. And she is a phenomenal advocate. And listen, Wendy, I know that you have a personal relationship with some of the people in the world of Scientology, just like I have a personal relationship with some of the people in LA. I know that you have if I'm not mistaken, you spent like the weekend in, I know you went there, but you spent like some significant time with Natalie, right?
Correct. Yep.
If I'm not mistaken. And I just, I want to make sure that they know that if there's anything I could ever do for any of the foundations that they have or whatever it is that they're doing, and I'm sure they're doing a great job. I'm not saying they need me, but if they were ever to request, I would be the first one to jump out and try to help, because that's it's the reason I'm passionate about this stuff to begin with.
Put me in, coach. I'm ready to play.
Yep. Yeah, so exactly. Put me in, coach. Exactly correct.
All right. So what I wanted to bring this back up again, and me and Taz, thank you much. That hey, I appreciate that I was granted the privilege to be able to chat with Yisroel today. But again, Yisroel, it's been a pleasure hearing you, and I understand that it's a life-altering experience that you've gone through, and you've shared it with us. And thank you for gracing us with that story. So I appreciate that.
Absolutely, and we'll continue. Whenever this is not a one and done. This is
Yep.
I appreciate it too. And guys, I want to say this very clearly. When Shannon at one point asked me to tell a small portion of my story, it wasn't like this, but I was very willing to do so. And there's only one other major interview, and they did a good job. And I'm not saying anything bad about that local station, but what I started to recognize, like what I refer to as, correct me if I'm wrong, but it's called the legacy media. Like what would CNN
mainstream or legacy mainstream?
Okay, so mainstream media, it's very difficult for me because they'll talk to me for a long period of time, and then I won't know what's going to actually be put up or how it's going to be presented. And when Wendy approached me about this, it was, you can ask Wendy, he was probably waiting a day or two, but I didn't see that message until after Friday. But the moment I saw the message, I immediately said, of course, because this is the type of thing where I absolutely, now, if Wendy's good at breaking it down and making a few shorts, good. That'll make me happy. That won't frustrate me at all. This is now out there for people to see the entire It's not broken up. There's no agenda. Wendy doesn't have an agenda here and therefore I appreciate you because you're giving me the platform to do exactly what, even as a Jewish man, what I wanted to say to you was, and I was hoping that it would be understood, but I wanted to say it towards the end that, Amy dropped a link for charity, like I said, and I just hope that my friend Daniel, who's on the other side of the pond, I hope that he gets a speedy recovery. But the responsibility, according to Jewish law, based upon that anecdotal question I said about the question that this great rabbi once asked about leaving Egypt, it's the responsibility to share with others your experience. And I became very uncomfortable sharing it with much of the mainstream media. And so when I do have the opportunity to have a conversation like this, you're doing nothing but a favor for me as well. However much you're gaining from it, I'm probably gaining more. And I'm being truthful about that.
I'm going to make an easy 37 cents on this today. So I really appreciate that. But I think it's an important story. And again, the idea that you're not a stranger, you're a person who protests with us here in Chicago.
Yeah, I want to make it very clear. Like, yeah, that should be made, Wendy, that needs to be made very clear right now. My interview with Shannon, the one short one that I did, she's a friend. Me and Wendy, this is not like, oh, Wendy heard about my story and start. Me and Wendy have been very good friends from the moment I met him up until now. And this is something that he just really appropriately brought up once I was already talking about it. And he knew about this. It's not like this is something he only found out about later. This is something he knew about because we would discuss why I'm passionate about this. We had conversations about why. And he really waited till a good time, and I'm more than happy to do this on his channel. And I like I said to Shannon, I've said this to Mindy too. I hope that people make money, meaning like I hope that like this does something for your channel, my channel, whoever's channel. I do. I truly hope that. I hope that anybody that gives charity is I don't have an issue with people per se, making money. It's when there's that, and we could get into this a different time, but for right now, like I think it is smart that we're focusing on the heroes and the 112 that did not make it, unfortunately, and the man sitting next to me and all these people that literally gave up their life. But there's nothing wrong with benefiting from this as long as you're very straightforward about it, which I do love, because you don't have an agenda besides you're on my channel, tell the story, and I think you're doing a great job. You do a great. That's why you and Shannon are so much better than I am. You guys do a great job interviewing. You really do. Both of
Thank
you.
I appreciate
do such a phenomenal job. When we're out there with Scientology, people don't understand. Wendy just he really tries to just. He says, "Can I just ask you a question?" Like not even with like a loud, and if people were thinking clearly, they'd realize that he just wants to have a conversation. I've never seen him like maliciously, he very truthfully would love for some of those people to talk to him, and as much as we say we're probably not going to pull people out of Scientology, right? We already know that. It's really more of making sure, but you never know.
Correct. I'm not going to stop trying, but I do think that I'm more equipped to help stop you from going in. Right. So a little bit. So we've talked about. I want to say that so far the story we've talked about is mostly the facts as is. Right. These were the briefly what the facts are, and then additionally what Israel's recollection of the day was. Now I will tell you, there's another story and there's a twist, and I want to get into that, and I will do this on another chat. But similar to this, right? There's a mainstream media, and the mainstream media has to tell a story, and that story may or may not contrive or look like what actually happened. And we know that, right, mainstream media, there's advertising, there's money. United Airlines needs to protect its image in these spaces and everything of that nature. And I'm not saying that United Airlines didn't do a great job in making sure that these people are safe and everything of that nature, but there are different stories that are being told, and there's reasons for that. And I'd like to kind of break down that element of it as well, just to say that, hey, here's what you're hearing and here's really kind of what actually happened in these scenarios. So, and I think it's important that I give you a chance for that voice.
Wendy, I appreciate it tremendously. I've been um, um, speaking to that directly. I will say that I was very happy on Friday that a certain gentleman came out with an unbelievable article. Everybody's more than welcome to go read his article, and it's phenomenal. And for me, I was really happy that Susan White, who literally was one of the people that plotted to save my life, was honored on that day this past Friday. I think that was beautiful. But at the same time, there were survivors in my chat that they have their own experience and their own, they struggle with things on a daily basis. And I think it's important for me. I feel like with my friends, my fellow survivors, so I really feel like they're family. I just hope that it gives them the courage to come back out there, come on, I know that eventually I'll say a few names just straight up, but like, I'm hoping Avi sees this, and I'm hoping that Jonathan sees this, and Aaron Badis. Aaron, man, what a crazy story. Aaron Badis, this little kid that was stuffed into pillows and survived, and he's a pilot. Like, that's what he does for a living. He flies,
awesome.
Which is so incredible. And he was in my chat the other day. Anybody in my chat will remember that he was in there. And we laid stones by some benches this year outside of the museum, and it was a beautiful experience. But I just wanted to say that I really hope that Aaron, comes out with me one of these years, and it's hard. I know it's rough to take back, but I just want to say, Aaron, specifically, I'll speak to Aaron right now at this moment. 2 years ago, Avi, you're incredible for coming back out there for the first time ever. Avi is it sounds like a boy's name in Judaism, but for her, it's her nickname for Abigail. So Abigail, so Avi, and her brother Jonathan. And I hope that one day he comes out. But it was incredible that Aaron was willing to sit in the chat and listen to everything and watch everything. I know how difficult it is, Aaron. I mean, it took me so long to get back there, and I just want to say that you were such an incredible inspiration to me to show such fortitude and courage, real courage, to stick it out in the chat and say things to me like, "Oh, Israel, go put a stone for me and my family," and that was incredible, Aaron. And I want to say that specifically. It was incredible. And my friends, I always say that it's my siblings and my friends really saved my life, essentially, on not just a physical level, on that living life level. And I'll always consider my fellow survivors family, especially those that were my age. Jonathan, I just want to say this. I feel like I can't go without saying this. Jonathan's just a drop younger than me. And like I said, it's such a difficult story because he was there by himself. His sister was in a coma, and he lost his parents in the crash, and he was kind of stuck in the hospital for a little bit until a family member came to become a guardian over him. And Jonathan, I know how hard it is out there, man. I know the struggle. I do. And you were such an inspiration while I was in the hospital, and he was one of the only people allowed in my room. They allowed him to come and hang out with me because he kind of had nowhere to go at that moment. He was in the hospital, and theoretically he could have gone, quote unquote, home. But he obviously couldn't. There was nowhere. It's just when I think about you, Jonathan, and I just want you to know that my heart just sinks, and I can't imagine what it must have been like to have lived through that, remember it all, and sit there in the hospital waiting for someone to come, quote unquote, take you home. I don't know how you do it. You're an incredible human being. And Spencer Bailey, what an incredible story, and what an incredible the willingness to allow them to use your image in that statue. Some people might think like, oh, anybody would want that. Trust me, as a survivor, none of us theoretically want that. That was probably something that he had to literally dig deep down and say, okay, for others, I'm willing to do that. There's no way he did that for himself. That was something he did for others, and in my opinion, God knows that. And same thing with Aaron. Aaron's story is incredible. And but Jonathan and Avi and Spencer and Aaron, I would say that those are some of. And listen, I'll never say, because there was the crew too, and there was the captain. But I read that poem while I was in Sioux City, and I feel very strongly about that poem, about the survivors, because there's a lot that's discussed, and I know that we're going to discuss this on a different day, but there's a lot discussed about the heroes that were there, and of course the 112 that perished that will never be forgotten. But then there are also the survivors where all of us lost a little bit of ourselves that day, and there's probably, we don't feel like we'll ever gain that back. And when I was first interviewed, I couldn't stop crying throughout the whole interview. I'm in a better place in life right now. It was cool to go back this time. And the rabbi, I love you, Rabbi. Whenever you watch this, I know you will. And the rabbi, I knew I was doing well. The rabbi first saw me when he came this year, and I haven't seen the rabbi in 2 years. And the plane crash rabbi came, and he just looked at me, and he saw the mode I was in, and he was just blown away that I was at where I was at this time, because there were many years that I came in where I was just an absolute disaster of emotions. And I just want to say that it's people like the rabbi and Aaron and Susan White, and when the captain was alive, throughout my lifetime, that they gave me that feeling of pride, like they're watching their child grow up, kind of a thing. And it's incredibly powerful for me to have others give me that positive affirmation that's so necessary to deal with as a survivor.
That's an incredibly great story as well, right? This idea that a community surrounded you, right, and they weren't going to let you fail, right?
That's exactly correct.
So, okay, I think that what I'd like to do now is say, hey, let's end on a positive note. What are you doing tomorrow, Israel?
Tomorrow we are going to be chilling hard.
Yes.
With Mindy, and I'm going to be waking up early, saying the spiritual prayers I say at sunrise, and then we're all going to be meeting up tomorrow, hopefully around noon by the org. And as Mindy said to me earlier, anybody, Mindy's very familiar with Wendy specifically, and myself, but she was very specific that any Chicago protesters that want to meet her, she would absolutely love to meet you guys. And I'll say this, it's like I told Wendy, like I said, she's not familiar with all of us. She's very familiar with Wendy, and she's excited to meet Wendy, and she hopes to hang out with Wendy very much so, and with me. But I'll just say one cool thing about Mindy that I feel the same about Paul and Shannon and the other protesters too. I just haven't had a chance to meet them as well. But I will say that she is exactly the person that you see on her channel. It's the same person. She's not she doesn't turn on this really sweet vibe type person when she's live. That is literally her 24/7. She's the sweetest ever. Yeah. But yeah.
Amy said this.
She calls me Dr. V. Amy's
yesterday
right.
when she said this, she said it on her chat yesterday or 2 days ago. When she was with Jackson.
Well, the reason I'll tell you. First of all, I love it. I'm not gonna tell her to stop because it's incredible. But part of my relationship with Mindy is through some other people that I work with. So me and Mindy met because I'm some of clientele, let's call it, in the mentoring program, and because of that, I met Mindy. So all the peeps in my program call me Dr. B, and I love it that she calls me that.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
Love it. All right.
Mindy is Mindy. Is that what MDMA? Yes. Nice. MDMA, you were awesome over the weekend. You and a bunch of you guys, but you were awesome over the weekend. I really appreciated you being in my chat throughout the entire time. That was awesome.
Yeah, agreed. MD Media, great support. And again, another channel. Yeah, I know that I do tend towards the protesters that are out there so consistently. Cubs, MD Media, Eric Rader. It just I love the people that really are putting in the work. Now, what I hate about that statement is everybody thinks, oh, and I hate everybody else. It's not a true statement in any way, shape, or form, right? I love everybody that's doing any form of protest. I don't care if you protest like me or you don't protest like me. I like that you don't like the church just like I am. And I've told everybody that I know there's all kinds of infighting and backbiting and all of that fun stuff that goes on. And I've told everybody, as soon as we get rid of Scientology, you can pick my next enemy. But until Scientology is gone, I'm just going to have one enemy. So
I love it. I love the attitude that you have, and that's why I feel in Chicago. For me personally, I feel blessed that and I watch you too. None of us, none of us are interested in the drama. We're all there for the right reasons. And all the Chicago protesters it's always been phenomenal. Like I said, the main reason I don't know everybody as well is only because the day that they have the ability to go, and again, guys, give people credit where credit is due. Some of these people, I think me and Wendy are the two closest to the org. I think like most other people, it takes them a lot of traveling to get there. And I appreciate that tremendously. I love when we're all out there together. And it's also cool, even if we just go there and get them to shut the shades.
Yep. Absolutely correct. Absolutely correct. LA, thanks for coming in. It's all right that you're late. Fuzzy, I have an important job for you. Where are we going to go raid? And Israel, if you just stay on after right after we head out, I'll chat with you in the back office a little bit.
Absolutely.
So great conversation. Thank you again. Thank you so much for being here. All right. Fuzzy, you picked Cubs? All right. You're my favorite mod today. Well, you and Amy are my two favorite mods today. So
there you go.
Thanks again, Amy, for stepping up and jumping in on short notice, making sure that you're supporting your creator. Really appreciate that. Folks, let's head over to Cubs Champion. Let them know Wendy sent you. And again, thanks to our guest here today, Yisroel Brownstein, for talking and just the miraculous survival of a plane crash. That's phenomenal. So, all right, folks, I appreciate it. Head over. We'll talk to you later. Bye-bye.